Have you ever felt torn between doing what's right and doing what your boss told you to do? Maybe you were asked to take a shortcut or ignore a policy. Maybe you were asked to mislead a customer or a client. Maybe you were asked to look the other way when a coworker was mistreated. If you're like me, at some point you have faced an unethical request from a leader, and you've had to consider whether you're going to follow that leader, and if so, how to be an ethical follower. In my case, I worked in structural steel fabrication. I made big things out of steel. I was in quality control, so my job was to inspect every structural steel component before it left our facility. And I took my job pretty seriously, probably too seriously at times. But when I thought about the components that left our facility, I couldn't help but think about the people whose lives depended on those structures. I thought about people waking up in their home, getting their family ready to start the day. I thought about people crossing a bridge on the way to work. I thought about people connecting with friends and family at an event center or a stadium. I understood that the work we do in structural steel is very important and that it has a big impact on public safety. So, of course, I took my job seriously. And then Bob walked in. Bob was our VP of operations, and to be honest, I didn't see Bob very much, and I was pretty okay with that. Bob often had meetings all day in an office that overlooked the shop floor, so while I was inspecting structural steel in the shop, Bob was doing whatever he does in his office, right? Kyle's space, Bob's space. But in this case, we had a high priority order for a new client, and Bob came to the shop. He came directly to me and said, "Kyle, we have to get this order out today. No exceptions." So I think, all right, what can I do for Bob? So I commit that Bob, when this order is ready for inspection, I'm going to inspect it. When it passes inspection, I'm going to release it for shipment. It is a simple, predictable process. It's one we use every single day in quality control, and it serves our business well. We put out a quality product, and we don't take shortcuts just because we're up against a deadline. Not the response Bob was looking for. So over the course of the day, Bob is wearing me down. He is looking over my shoulder. He's questioning my inspection decisions, and he's trying to rush me through my work to get this order out on time. And as our shipping window is closing, and I am still working through my inspections, he signals to the truck driver to bring the truck into our facility, park it right next to my workstation. And Bob announces to the shop, "That's it, load it up, it's going out now." Now, I wish I could tell you that I appealed to Bob's better nature, if Bob does in fact have a better nature. I wish I could say that I challenged him. Maybe I helped him see the implications of skipping those remaining inspections, the risk that poses to public safety. But I didn't. I threw up my hands and I said, "Whatever, Bob," and I walked away. In spite of my commitment to quality, in spite of knowing that it's wrong to send structural steel out without being inspected, I went ahead with it anyway. As the saying goes, I decided to go along to get along, and I missed an opportunity to influence my leader to do the right thing. Now, I do want to offer that when my manager found out about this situation, I did earn an all-expense-paid trip out to the field to go complete my inspection, so everything is fine with that structure. But I failed in that moment. And I committed what social psychologists call a crime of obedience. That's when we as followers receive an unethical request from a leader, and we just defer to the leader. Perhaps because it's too uncomfortable or too stressful to speak up, or maybe we just don't know what to say. In my failure, I realized that I have a lot to learn from people who have faced an unethical request from a leader and who have handled it better than I did. So I started doing research on ethical followership at work, and I specifically sought out professional engineers. I said, hey, tell me about a time when you faced an unethical request from a leader. What did you do? How did you prepare yourself for that moment? So we talked about this sense of identity that you develop over time, right? Becoming a good person, a good engineer, a good follower. We talked about how to assess whether one is truly facing an ethical dilemma. But we mostly focused on what ethical followership looks like in practice. What are those ethical follower behaviors we can use? In my research, I found 4 main approaches to ethical followership. An ethical follower can empower their leader, they can collaborate with them, they may undermine them at times, or they can transcend that leader-follower relationship. To help you prepare for the next time you face an unethical request from a leader, I want to share these tools with you, and I encourage you to add them to your toolbox. First, participants in my research described behaviors you might immediately think of when you consider resisting an unethical request from a leader. They refuse to comply. Simple as that. I'm not going to do what you're asking me to do. They reported the situation, maybe within the organization or outside the organization, to a regulatory authority. They left their job or even the profession, sacrificing pay and prestige to maintain a sense of personal integrity. They also at times threatened, if you keep insisting that I do this, I'm going to leave or I'm going to report you. But resistance doesn't always look like walking out the door or blowing the whistle or making threats. Ethical followership can look like that follower collaborating with their leader or empowering them to make the right decision. When it comes to empowering the leader, there are a couple of behaviors that stand out in my research. One is querying or asking questions, helping that leader consider the ethical implications of what they have asked us to do. In my case, Bob was insistent that we take that order, load it on the truck, send it out, even though it was obvious to everybody that it hadn't passed inspection. So I could have asked Bob, hey Bob, are we doing the standard inspections on this order? Or I could have said, Bob, inspections haven't been completed yet. Do you know what the process is to waive an inspection? I've never had to do that. Or better yet, earlier in the day, when he began putting pressure on me and trying to rush me through my inspections, I could have asked Bob, maybe over my shoulder, Bob, what would give you the confidence right now that these inspections are being done properly and efficiently? Querying can provide an honorable way out of that unethical request for the leader. It can empower them to adjust course, do the right thing, and save face. Another way to empower that leader is to educate them, sharing knowledge and insights that can help them make the right decision. It often entails sharing technical information with a non-technical audience. In my case, Bob insisted that I accept welds in that structural steel that did not meet our acceptance criteria. They were defective welds. In the spirit of educating, I could have walked him through the test. I could have said, Bob, come on over. Let me show you how we identify that there's a defect in that weld. Let me show you how we size it. Let me show you how we compare that to our acceptance criteria and make a decision. Better yet, I could have helped Bob understand the potential impact of those defective welds on the structure and the risk that poses to public safety. Like querying, educating can provide an honorable way out for that leader. Participants in my research also talked about collaborative behaviors that they've used. They've reframed the situation, helping that leader recognize other options that they have, or to simply look at the issue from other perspectives. They negotiated with their leader, proposing solutions, trying to find a compromise. They also appealed to their leader using logic or emotion or ethical standards. When I think back to that day, I remember how I felt being monitored, being rushed. I know I could have given an emotional appeal and said, Bob, it's important to me that leadership trusts me to do my job, and I don't feel trusted right now. because I see you monitoring every step I take. Finally, some participants in my research said, you know what, there's no changing my leader's mind. I'm not going to be able to influence them. So they turned their influencing toward their team or their organization or society in general. They advocated for policy or education or professionalism. They connected with colleagues to build coalitions, to establish communities of practice, to bring people together to share knowledge and stories. I'm quite confident I could have got other shop floor leaders together and just asked them, hey, what can we do to keep Bob in his office? I don't think we would have got to a no Bob in the shop policy, but we would have made good progress. Now, if you're not sure which ethical follower behaviors you want to use, if you're not sure which approach you want to take, I would encourage you to start with empowering your leader through querying and educating. You can also collaborate with them. Think about what you could say to reframe the situation, to negotiate with them, or to present an appeal. There will be times maybe you can't influence your leader, so think about what you can do to connect with others and to be an advocate for change. Finally, as a last resort, you might consider undermining your leader, whether that is refusing or threatening, leaving, or reporting. I would encourage you, if you go this route, go in with a plan and get some feedback from people you trust. Now, when I think back on this research, what strikes me is that no matter how creative or courageous these ethical follower behaviors can be in practice, what I consistently heard was, I wish I had acted sooner. I wish I had been more decisive. I wish instead of waiting, instead of avoiding the situation, that I had taken action. And I think that's an important lesson for all of us here today. As we think about our potential as ethical followers, we have to consider what taking action looks like for us. You will have unethical leaders. You'll have them at work, at school, in your family, at your place of worship, certainly in politics. But leadership is not something that is just handed to you. It is something that you accept and participate in every single day. That is, you co-create leadership. And I think we each have a responsibility to co-create ethical leadership. And we have the tools. We know what ethical follower behaviors we can use to influence our leader or our peers. Now, I was not ready for my moment as a quality control inspector. I had no idea how to respond or even cope with a company vice president trying to rush me through my work. So I didn't query, I didn't educate, I didn't collaborate in any way. I just avoided the situation until I ultimately just complied and said, whatever, Bob. The next time you feel torn between doing what's right and doing what your boss told you to do, I want you to remember that you have the tools to co-create ethical leadership, but you have to decide to use them. You have to decide whether you're going to be an ethical follower.